Hello all and welcome to another 1 vs 2. Now, back in the day when the N64 was considered to be the fastest and most powerful games console on earth, I was looking for a new game and I stumbled across Castlevania. I'd never heard of the series, but a friend who was with me at the time said that the previous games in the Castlevania series were really good, so I gave it a go and it was great. Shortly after, a prequel was released, Castlevania Legacy of Darkness. But does Legacy of Darkness stand on its own merits, fix problems with the original and become the superior game, or does it drown in a pool of its own pixelated blood? Well, let's have a look. As always, the first thing to do with this is to decide whether to go down the points-based system or to just talk about both games in various aspects and see what happens. In the end, the latter option seemed to be the best, going down what I've come to call the X-Men Legends route, so no points will be awarded, but I'll still compare different aspects of the games and discuss how well each one does it, and to avoid any confusion, the first game will be called Castlevania and the other just Legacy of Darkness. You can probably guess the first aspect I'll mention, the good old plot. In the first Castlevania, do I really need to go into the plot of the first one? The year is 1852, Dracula is back, go twat him one. Granted there is a tad more to it than that, but that's ultimately what you set off to do, and that's ultimately what you end up doing, regardless of whether you choose to play as Reinhard Schneider or Carrie Fernandez. You meet various other characters along your journey, like Rosa, Charlie, Vincent and Renan, but there'll be more on them later. Legacy of Darkness takes place in 1844, 8 years before Castlevania, and stars werewolf Cornell, whose sister Ada has been kidnapped. He sets off to find her, only to discover she's going to be used as a sacrifice to resurrect Dracula, and you have to go twat him one. This makes your reason for setting out a bit more personal, and cutscenes along the way play on this and his desperation for getting his sister back. Again, there's more to it with the characters you come across along the way, so let's delve into them. As mentioned, you have two playable characters in Castlevania. Reinhard is the heir to the Belmont clan of vampire hunters, brandishes the classic whip and has the responsibility to rid the world of Dracula. Carrie is a young girl with magical powers and her mother died while protecting her from a mob. Carrie takes it upon herself to use her powers for good and take down Dracula. It's not until you get to the villa that you meet anyone new. First to mention is Charles Vincent, an elderly vampire hunter who wants you to leave battling Dracula to him. Rosa is a vampire, though she doesn't live like one, and she makes more of an appearance in Reinhard's story. Next is Renan, a demon who sells you potions and healing items, and then there's Malice, a young child you save from a garden maze. Well, I say you save him, in reality he runs off, you follow him and end up at the exit. Future characters depend on who you are. As I mentioned, Rosa appears more in Reinhard's story and is controlled by Death, who makes Rosa fight you, and eventually you fight Death. For Carrie, you come across a witch called Actress who makes you fight one of Carrie's relatives, and then subsequently you fight Actress as well. En route to Dracula's room, there are two rooms where battles against people can take place. First room is Renan. If you spent more than 30,000 gold, he says your soul now belongs to him as per the contract and attacks you. It's a cool fight, but it's not especially difficult to dodge most of his attacks and kick his ass back to whatever dimension he came from. The next is if it takes you longer than 16 in-game days to get to Dracula. You come across Charles Vincent, who managed to get to Dracula before you but was turned into a vampire and attacks you. This is what determines what ending you get. When you get to Dracula, you fight him, and once you've twatted him enough, he dies. Now, if you had to fight Charles Vincent, that's it. Malice appears, you tell him it's all okay, and you take him away, but with connotations that Malice isn't the sweet innocent child he seems. If you made it within the 16 days, you don't fight Charles, and when you've beaten Dracula, the castle begins to collapse. You leg it, come across Malice, and it is revealed that you only defeated Dracula's servant. Surprise surprise, Malice is Dracula, and he reveals his true form. You fight him, twat him a few times, and once you beat him, he reverts back to Malice, who seems to be free of Dracula. This is where Charles turns up telling you not to be fooled, and that Malice really is Dracula himself. You then get drawn into an alternate world where you fight a dragon centipede thing that fires nuclear bombs at you and is an absolute bitch to defeat. I'll admit I used an action replay cheat to have permanently powered up weapons, and even then he was an absolute arse. If you manage to twat him enough, he'll die, and then you get the good ending, which is a lot more personal to that character and their story. Where Reinhard had Rosa and Carrie has Actress, Cornell has Ortega. He's a rival of Cornell's and he makes a deal with Dracula for power so he can defeat Cornell in combat. You can probably guess you have to twat him as well. You also come across a kid called Henry who you have to help out much in the same way you had to help out Malice in Castlevania, only this time Henry follows you rather than the other way round. Eventually you'll get to Dracula and it's only a 2-stage final battle rather than the possible 3 that Castlevania has, but even so, it's awesome. He only has the one ending, so you can take your sweet time getting to Dracula, but post-game rewards are rather different. In Castlevania, you have 3 special crystals to find. One can be found by both characters and the others can only be found by one character. All they do is unlock hard mode and an extra costume for each character. Woo! In Legacy of Darkness, completing the game with Cornell unlocks Henry, the kid from the villa, who has now grown up and goes looking for 6 children that have been kidnapped. You have a time limit to find them and each child you save unlocks something different, but Henry himself is an absolute badass. He's easily my favourite character and it's a huge shame his section is so short. The unlocks are Reinhard and Carrie, 3 alternate costumes and hard mode. Because of how much I love Henry, I actually managed to find an action replay cheat that allows you to play as him for the main game. And he's awesome. One thing I love about Legacy of Darkness's Reinhard is his new whip power-up. In the original, he just has a slightly longer whip with a different coloured tip, but in Legacy of Darkness, it starts as a usual whip and then turns into a ball and chain, which is badass enough, but it then turns into what is essentially a whip lightsaber and it's awesome. The other characters have slight colour variations, maybe a minor visual difference, but nothing as badass as the whip. As you're venturing around, there are other things to find, some in random places and dropped by enemies, including 4 throwing weapons: knife, axe, holy water and cross, with each one requiring a certain amount of red jewels to use. The axe has always been my favourite as it's effective and doesn't cost much to use. In Castlevania, the item is the item. A knife is a knife, an axe is an axe. However, in Legacy of Darkness, they can be powered up by picking up multiple of the same weapon. As an example, a level 1 axe is an axe, a level 2 axe causes a bolt of lightning to come down, and at level 3 it creates a shockwave which damages all nearby enemies. The axe was still my favourite, though being able to power them up makes it so that in some cases certain weapons are more useful than others. So, we've had a look at what you can find, the characters you can come across, unlockables and everything else, so all that's really left is to check out the stages themselves. In Castlevania, while the majority of the game is identical for both characters, 3 of the 8 stages are unique. Reinhard has the tunnels, Jewel Tower and Tower of Execution, while Carrie has the Waterway, Tower of Science and Tower of Sorcery. In Legacy of Darkness, as you start with Cornell, he goes through most of the stages, including places like the Jewel Tower and Tower of Sorcery, but he also has the Outer Wall stage rather than the Waterway or Tunnel. Reinhard and Carrie keep their unique stages, but it follows the same path as Cornell's story, so you start in the Foggy Lake rather than the Forest of Silence. Stages that appear in both games are designed differently, so when you play as Reinhard or Carrie, you play the Legacy of Darkness version rather than the version from the original game, so if you prefer the original version of the stages, you're gonna have a bad time. For the most part though, the stages seem to be more puzzle orientated in Legacy of Darkness. Areas that both Cornell and Reinhard or Carrie go through seem to be a tad shorter than in Castlevania, but they still retain the core essence of what each stage is about. Areas not visited by Cornell, like the tunnel or castle centre, seem to be exactly the same as they were in Castlevania. Cornell's unique stages are good, and again seem to be more puzzle based than any of the stages from the original. There are also some pretty good tunes to help in your exploration. version. For me, it's difficult to say whether I prefer the Castlevania or Legacy of Darkness version of the stages, but the additional stages used by Cornell are certainly a welcome addition. However, there is one minor aspect that is definitely better in Castlevania, and that's the voice acting. Granted, there isn't much anyway, but on some of the occasions you meet Dracula, well, the servant anyway, the lines are spoken, but in Legacy of Darkness, it's purely text regardless of which character you play as. Cornell has a few spoken lines during his intro, well, he says Ada twice, and that's the only time anything is actually spoken in the entire game. It's not a biggie, but it does just add a little nice bit extra to the scenes.
Miserable world, upstart weakling. All who oppose the Dark Lord must die. Come, meet your doom.
The main things that will be causing problems though will be the controls and camera. Don't get me wrong, normally they're fine, but you will come across cases where you'll press the jump button but too late and fall to your death, or the camera will be so awkwardly positioned you'll end up yet again falling to your doom. It seems as though the developers knew that there would be issues, so they've given you quite a large margin for error with a lot of the jumps, so you don't have to be pixel perfect in your timing, which really helps, but it doesn't solve the issue entirely. The characters also slide a bit before stopping, which can cause you to fall off ledges to your death if you don't stop earlier than you think you need to. It happens in both games and can be rage-inducingly frustrating when the mixture of controls, camera and sliding constantly ruin you. The N64 Castlevania games get a lot of flack from fans of the series, but I still really enjoyed them. Everything that is in Castlevania is in Legacy of Darkness, done better, and then it's got everything else the game has to offer, so ultimately, Legacy of Darkness is the superior game. There are a few things that Castlevania has over Legacy of Darkness, but they're so minor that if you don't have Castlevania, just get Legacy of Darkness. It gives you everything you could need for both games. See you next time.